All right. So are you ready to like really dive deep into some philosophical ideas for living a better life?
I am.
Yeah. All right. So we are going deep into your notes from that philosophy book.
Right.
That you've been like kind of struggling with.
Yeah.
And also this YouTube video that you found called 3+ hours of timeless philosophical lessons for a better life.
A long one.
It is a long one.
But good.
It's a lot to take in, but we are going to try to distill it down and find some wisdom
Yes.
that we can use to make our lives better.
Yeah. I think one of the coolest things about that video is how it ties together like ancient philosophy with modern problems.
Yeah.
And it really shows how like this wisdom is not just like some old dusty thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's relevant today.
Yeah. It is like they found a treasure chest of wisdom and handed us the key.
Exactly.
So the video starts off by talking about this concept that I think we can all relate to, like the trap of caring too much about what other people think.
Right.
And they use this metaphor of like losing yourself, where the more we crave validation from others, the more we kind of end up living a life that's designed by other people.
Yeah, it's like we're constantly looking over our shoulder.
Yeah.
You know, to see like what other people are thinking, even for like the tiniest decisions. And the video talks about how like this fear of judgment can like paralyze us.
Totally.
It can prevent us from like doing things that we really want to do, like whether it's taking a dance class or starting a YouTube channel or just like, you know, expressing our true selves.
You know what that reminds me of is that story that they tell in the video about Emily.
Oh, yeah.
The artist.
Yeah.
Who, she had this like really unique artistic style, but her family wanted her to paint these like traditional landscapes.
Yeah.
And so for years, she just like conformed to their expectations.
Oh, wow.
But she ended up feeling like super creatively stifled.
Yeah.
Like not fulfilled at all.
Right.
And then finally, she just had this like breaking point and she decided, you know what? I'm just going to embrace my own style.
Yeah.
Even if it means my family disapproves.
Right.
And the really remarkable thing is that like as soon as she did that, not only did she like feel creatively liberated, but she also gained all this critical acclaim.
Wow.
Like it was like the world was waiting for her to be her true self.
That's amazing.
And I don't know if you remember this, but in your notes, you had something about Jean-Paul Sartre.
Oh, yeah.
And this idea of bad faith.
Yes.
Which is like basically living inauthentically to conform to social pressures.
Exactly.
And I feel like Emily's story is like the perfect example
of
like the opposite of bad faith.
Right.
Where by choosing authenticity, she actually found both like personal fulfillment and like external success.
Yeah. And it shows that like sometimes you have to like go against what other people expect of you to really like live a better life.
Yeah. It makes you wonder how many of us are stuck in this like bad faith, you know, just silencing our true voices because we're so afraid of what other people are going to think.
Absolutely.
It's kind of a scary thought.
Yeah.
So the video then goes on to talk about this concept of action versus motivation.
Okay.
And the creator of the video basically argues that like waiting for motivation to strike before you take action is a recipe for just like staying stuck.
Right.
And they even have this quote.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, the people who succeed aren't the ones waiting for inspiration. They are the ones who take action despite not feeling ready.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And it's like, I feel like we're always told like motivation is so important.
Yeah.
But this is like flipping that idea on its head.
It is. I think what's interesting about that perspective is that it kind of changes how we think about discipline.
Yeah.
Like we usually think of discipline as like forcing ourselves to do things we don't want to do. But this is saying like discipline is more about aligning your actions with your purpose. So when you know what you're about and what your goals are, then taking action, even when it's hard, becomes more natural.
So it's less about like waiting for that burst of motivation.
Right.
And more about like having this sense of purpose that fuels your action.
Exactly.
I like that.
And the video actually talks about laziness as like a mindset, like a way of thinking that can keep us stuck.
Yeah.
And they say that we can break free from that laziness mindset by just like becoming aware of the thoughts and beliefs that contribute to it.
Okay, yeah.
And then actively choosing to challenge.
So like identifying the stories we tell ourselves about why we can't or shouldn't do something and then try to like rewrite those stories.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of shifting perspectives, the video then goes into this concept that I find so fascinating.
Yeah.
The paradox of control.
Yeah, they use that great analogy in the video about clenching sand in your fist.
Yes.
You know, the harder you squeeze, the more it slips away.
Exactly. And it's like, it perfectly illustrates how the more we try to control every single thing, the less control we actually have.
Yeah.
And it's like we end up creating more frustration for ourselves
Totally.
than if we had just kind of like gone with the flow. It's like we're trying to like force the river to flow uphill instead of just letting it go its natural course.
And that reminds me of some of the things you had in your notes about like ancient myth.
Oh, yeah.
Like King Midas and Icarus.
Yeah.
These are two characters who were obsessed with control. You know, Midas wanted everything he touched to turn to gold.
Yeah.
And Icarus wanted to fly too close to the sun.
Right.
And we all know how those stories ended.
Yeah, not well.
Not well.
So it's like a warning that like trying to control everything, especially things that are outside of our control, can have some pretty bad consequences. But I'm a little confused though, like if we shouldn't strive for control, then what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Just like let go of everything and become passive.
Right.
Like just let life happen to us.
Well, I think that's where the paradox comes in.
Okay.
It's not about like giving up on your goals or becoming totally passive.
Yeah.
It's more about recognizing the limits of your control.
Okay.
And finding a balance between striving for what you want.
Yeah.
And surrendering to what you can't change.
Okay. I like that.
Remember that story they tell in the video?
Oh, yeah.
About the old man who fell into the river?
Oh, yeah.
So he could have like tried to fight the current, but instead he just surrendered to it and it carried him to safety.
Yeah.
I love that story.
Yeah. It's powerful. And that reminds me of that Taoist concept of Wu Wei.
Yes.
Which is like effortless action
Yeah.
or going with the flow.
Exactly.
So it's not about being passive.
Yeah.
It's about aligning our actions with like the natural order of things.
Right.
And sometimes that means working with the forces at play instead of against them.
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction.
Yeah, it is a subtle but really profound shift in perspective.
It is.
It's like we're all trying to like, you know, swim upstream.
Yeah.
When really we should just like let the current carry us.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Right.
You know, and that's just the tip of the iceberg with this video. Like, there's so much more to unpack.
So much more.
So many thought-provoking ideas.
Yeah.
And in part 2 of this deep dive, we are going to go even deeper.
Absolutely.
We're going to explore more concepts from the video.
Right.
And also, I'm excited to tie it in with some of the really insightful notes that you've taken in your philosophy.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see how those connect.
Yeah, and most importantly, we're going to try to figure out, like, how can we actually apply these timeless ideas to our daily life?
That's the key.
Because it's one thing to, like, think about these concepts, but it's another thing to actually, like, put them into practice. So stay tuned for part 2 of our philosophical adventure. All right, so welcome back to our deep dive into philosophical ideas for like a better life.
I'm ready for more.
Me too. So in the last part, we were talking about like the trap of validation.
Right.
And how important it is to just be our authentic selves.
Yeah.
And we also touched on that whole paradox of control.
Right.
And the idea of like going with the flow.
Way.
Blah, blah, blah.
Way.
Yeah, exactly.
Close action. But we only like scratched the surface.
We did. There's so much more.
So much more to explore.
Yeah. And, you know, speaking of exploring, I'm really curious to dive into your notes from that philosophy book.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like you've been grappling with some of these same ideas.
I have.
Especially the idea of control.
Yeah, it's been on my mind a lot lately.
Yeah.
You know when we were talking about the paradox of control?
Uh-huh.
In that story about the old man in the river?
Yeah.
It made me think about this note I jotted down about Aristotle's concept of the golden mean.
Oh. I was so fascinated by his idea that, like, virtue lies in finding that middle ground.
Yeah.
Between two extremes.
Right.
But I'm not sure how that connects to the idea of control.
Well, I think if we apply the golden mean to the concept of control, then the two extremes would be like, on the one hand, clinging to control really tightly.
Okay.
And on the other hand, like completely letting go of control and becoming passive.
So the golden mean would be somewhere in between.
Exactly. It's that sweet spot where we recognize what we can influence.
Yeah.
And we put effort into those things.
Uh-huh.
But we also accept the things that we can't change.
Okay. So it's about finding that balance.
Yes. Balance between striving and surrender.
I like that.
It makes you think about how often we swing between those two extremes.
Yeah.
Like we're either micromanaging every detail or we're feeling totally helpless when things don't go our way.
Yeah, it's like we're either like a control freak or we're just like giving up completely.
Exactly. And maybe Aristotle's golden mean can help us find a more balanced approach.
Yeah, I think so too.
And, you know, your notes also touch on the Stoic philosophy, which also emphasizes focusing on what's within our control.
Right.
You have a whole section on Epictetus.
I do. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, he's a good one.
He believed that, like, our thoughts and our actions and our judgments, those are all things that are within our control.
Right.
But external events, other people's opinions, those are outside of our control.
Exactly. And he argued that true freedom comes from focusing on what we can influence and letting go of the rest.
Did his ideas resonate with you as you were reading? They really did.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in worrying about things we can't change.
Yeah.
But Epictetus reminds us that like our true power lies in choosing how we respond.
Yeah, to whatever life throws at us.
And it's interesting how this idea of focusing on what we can control ties in with that earlier point from the video about action versus motivation.
I see that connection too.
It's like we can't wait for external motivation.
Right.
Or for the perfect circumstances.
Yeah.
We have to just take ownership of our choices.
Yes.
And act.
Even when we don't feel ready.
Yeah, even when we're scared.
Exactly.
It's like that quote from the video.
Oh, yeah.
The people who succeed aren't the ones waiting for inspiration.
Right.
They're the ones who take action despite not feeling ready.
It's a good reminder.
Yeah, it is.
That action often comes before motivation.
Yeah. And sometimes just taking that first step can create its own momentum.
Absolutely.
When I think about taking action, even when we're uncertain or scared, it makes me think about Viktor Frankl.
Oh, yeah.
Who, as a Holocaust survivor,
right,
experienced firsthand what it means to have control completely stripped away.
Yeah, in the most horrific way.
But even in those circumstances, he found that humans still have the freedom to choose their attitude.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And to find meaning.
Yeah. And he argued that finding meaning even in suffering is what gives life purpose.
Right.
And this ties back to the Stoic idea of focusing on what's within our control.
Yes.
Because even when things are really tough, we still have the freedom to choose our attitude.
Our perspective.
Yeah, and the meaning we give to those experiences.
Exactly.
This makes me think about the video's discussion on the difference between kindness and being overly nice.
Oh, yeah.
Especially their point about setting boundaries.
Right.
It can be so hard to prioritize our own needs.
Yeah.
Especially when we want to be kind to others.
Yeah, we don't want to seem selfish.
Right. But maybe like Frankl suggests, true kindness starts with honoring our own values.
Yeah.
And setting limits to protect our well-being.
I think that's a really crucial point.
Yeah, it is.
And the video talks about this concept of the economy of niceness.
Right.
Which basically means that if we're constantly giving without setting any boundaries, it can lead to like an imbalance in our relationships.
Totally.
Where one person is always giving and the other person is always taking.
And it's not sustainable.
It's not.
And when I think about the stories of Emily the artist and the old man in the river, they both kind of highlight the importance of honoring our own needs and instincts, even when it means like going against what's expected of us.
Absolutely.
Or choosing a path that's less traveled.
And I think that's a perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive, where we're going to talk about some practical tools and techniques for putting these philosophical ideas into action.
Yeah, because ultimately that's what it's all about, right?
It is.
It's not just about like thinking about these concepts.
Right.
It's about finding ways to actually live a better, more fulfilling life.
Exactly. So get ready to turn theory into practice.
All right.
In part 3, we're going to explore some specific exercises.
Oh, cool.
From both the YouTube video and your notes.
Awesome.
Tools that can help you cultivate self-awareness.
Okay.
Find balance. And embrace your authentic self.
I like it.
It's all about turning those aha moments
into
lasting change.
So we'll see you there. All right, so welcome back to our philosophical deep dive.
It's time for the grand finale.
This is the final stretch of our journey, and we are shifting gears now.
Yes.
From contemplation to action.
Let's do it.
So we've explored some seriously profound ideas from that YouTube video and your philosophy notes.
Yeah.
But now we've got to figure out how to actually use
It's like we've been gathering all these ingredients for a delicious meal.
Yeah.
And now it's time to actually cook something.
I love that analogy. So where do we start?
Good question.
We talked a lot about the paradox of control.
Right.
And like letting go of the need to micromanage every single thing.
That's a tough one.
It is. And I remember you mentioned some practical techniques from the Stoics.
Oh, yeah. They had some good ones.
For cultivating that sense of surrender.
Right. Like accepting what we can't change.
Yeah. What were those again?
Well, one technique that I find really helpful is called the view from above.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
So it's all about shifting your perspective.
Okay.
Imagine yourself soaring high above the earth, looking down at the entire universe.
Wow.
You see continents, oceans, swirling weather patterns, the interconnectedness of it all.
Yeah.
And then you zoom in closer, you see bustling cities, tiny cars, people going about their daily lives.
Okay.
And then you zero in on yourself.
Yeah.
Just one tiny speck in this vast cosmic tapestry.
I can already feel my anxiety shrinking.
Right. It puts things in perspective. Like all those things that we stress about, they're actually pretty small.
in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly.
It's humbling, but also kind of liberating.
It is.
To realize we're not the center of the universe.
We're just a small part of something much bigger.
Okay, so we've got cosmic perspective. What else do the Stoics have for us?
Well, another technique they used is called premeditatio malorum.
Okay, that sounds a little intense.
It translates to the premeditation of...
So it's like thinking about bad things that could happen.
Basically, yeah.
But isn't that just going to make me more anxious?
Well, the Stoics thought that by mentally preparing for challenges in advance, you actually reduce your anxiety in the long run.
It's like practicing for a presentation.
Exactly. The more you rehearse, the less nervous you'll be.
Okay, so it's about taking away the element of surprise.
Yeah, and being prepared.
So when those challenges do come up, we're not totally freaked out.
Exactly. We've already thought about how we might handle them.
I like it. So we've got cosmic perspective and mental rehearsal. What other tools can we add to our toolkit?
Well, in addition to the Stoic practices, the YouTube video has some great tips for dealing with procrastination.
Oh, yeah. I'm always looking for those.
One technique they recommend is the Pomodoro.
Oh, yeah. I've tried that.
Have you?
Yeah, it's super simple, but it actually works.
It does. For those who haven't tried it, it's basically setting a timer for 25 minutes, working on one task with focus and then taking a 5-minute break.
Right.
And you just repeat that cycle.
And it's amazing how much you can get done.
It's like tricking your brain into stay focus.
Yeah, instead of feeling overwhelmed by a huge task, you're just focusing on 25 minutes at a time.
Right, which feels way more manageable.
Exactly. And those breaks are so important to preventing burnout.
Yeah, and the video also talks about mindfulness.
Oh, yeah.
For staying present and letting go of that need for control.
What are your thoughts on mindfulness?
I think it's incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
It's about paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
Okay.
Just noticing your thoughts, feelings, and sensations without getting swept away by them.
So it's like hitting the pause button on that constant mental chatter.
Yes, and tuning in to what's happening right now.
But how do you actually do it?
Well, one simple way is to focus on your breath. Just notice the rise and fall of your chest, the sensation of air going in and out.
That's a good one.
It's a simple but powerful way to anchor yourself in the present moment.
And I've also found mindful walking to be really helpful.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Just paying attention to the feeling of your feet on the ground, the movement of your body, the sights and sounds around you.
Exactly. And you can do that with any activity.
Yes.
Eating, listening, working.
Even doing the dishes.
It's about bringing that quality of presence to whatever you're doing.
You know, as we're talking about mindfulness and being present.
Yeah.
It makes me think about that concept from the video about the economy of niceness.
Right.
And setting boundaries.
Yeah, it can be hard to prioritize our own needs.
It is.
Especially when we want to be kind to others.
Right. But maybe mindfulness can help us tune in to those signals from our bodies and mind.
Like those whispers that tell us when we're reaching our limit.
Yes, exactly.
And that we need to step back.
And that reminds me of what you said earlier about self-compassion.
Oh, yeah.
Treating ourselves with kindness.
It's so important.
Yeah, it is. It's so easy to be self-critical.
It is. But as we cultivate mindfulness, we can also cultivate self-compassion.
I like that. And speaking of self-awareness.
Yes.
You had some great journaling prompts in your notes.
Oh, yeah.
For exploring our values and beliefs.
Right. Like what brings you joy?
Yeah. What are your strengths and weaknesses?
It's all about getting to know yourself better.
Yeah. And journaling is such a powerful tool for that.
It is.
It's like having a conversation with yourself on the page.
And as we become more self-aware, we can start to make more conscious choices.
About our thoughts and actions.
Exactly.
It's like we're becoming the architects of our own inner world.
I love that metaphor.
Me too.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of philosophy.
Yeah.
It's not about finding all the answers.
It's about the journey.
It is. It's about exploring, being curious,
Yeah.
and experimenting with different tools and techniques.
And finding what works for you.
Yes, exactly. So deep divers, go forth and experiment.
Try these techniques.
Yeah.
Explore your own philosophical ideas.
Oh. And remember, this is just the beginning.
It is. There's always more to learn.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those hearts open.